I am so happy to be here today. Like Dina and I were talking yesterday, and she's like, I don't even know some of the women who are signed up. And I'm like, this is amazing, because there is something in today that you saw that you were like, this is where I need to be in this space and time. I am a strong believer of the universe has your back. Has anyone read that book? Okay. I'm a firm believer in being exactly where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there. So my story that Dina got to hear in September, I called it Failure to Finisher. And it started about 10 years ago. I was a 3-time divorced single mom. I was a 3-time college dropout. My then 3-year-old son was showing signs of autism. I had filed bankruptcy. I was on government assistance. The one thing that I had done that was semi-redeemable was that I had run my first marathon that same year. I was waiting tables. That's what I had done for years and years and years. I was a waitress or a bartender, and I worked at this restaurant, and they're like, we're going to get some teams together to run the Ogden Marathon. And I was not a runner, but I was on this team to run the Ogden Marathon, and it was a 5-person team, and you divide up the 26.2 miles. But I trained, and I was like, hey, I'm gonna fulfill my obligation, and I'm gonna run. And I did my 7-mile portion, and then I got on a bus that took us down to the finish line. And as I'm on that bus, we're like passing all these marathoners, and I'm like, holy crap. Like, I'm very, very tired, and these people are still going. So then I got down to the finish line, and I was watching runners come in. And if you've been at a finish line of a marathon, you know, like, first of all, there's this energy and there's this magic. There's also blood and sweat and vomit. Like, it's beautiful and amazing. It's kind of like childbirth, but it's this amazing thing. And as I stood at the finish line, I'm like, oh my gosh, I want to do that. And so the next year, I trained and ran my first marathon. The fact that I had done this thing, it changed my life. And I didn't realize it at the time. They say that the percentage of people in their life who will run a marathon is 1% of the population. And I'm like, I can tell you that there's nothing special about me that makes me the 1% of any population. But by becoming a marathoner, all of a sudden I was. So when I was sitting in my very dark low in the fall of 2009, feeling completely hopeless, and feeling like, how am I taking care of my special needs child on my own? I can barely put a roof over his head. And I'm like, you know what? Yes, you can, Stacy. Like, you can do anything because you're a marathoner. Like, if you can do that, like, you can do anything. So I decided to go back to school and went back in 2010 and graduated in 2013. After that, I was like, oh my gosh, if I'm not a failure anymore, because now I've completed multiple marathons and I'm a college graduate. I was 36 when I graduated college. And I was like, I don't know how to identify anymore because I finish things. Like, I start and I finish. And so it created this new thought process about myself. When I was a junior in high school, I got pregnant, and it was pretty scandalous, 16 and pregnant. And I went into a bathroom stall one day, and someone had written, Stacy Rubino is a knocked up hoe on the bathroom stall door. And if you have never seen something derogatory written about yourself on a bathroom stall door, there's no feeling quite like it. So I immediately go to my guidance counselor, and she said, you need 2 credits to graduate. And you could do that. You could go to summer school and graduate early. But like, really, she was like, when are you due? Like, what's your due date? And I was due at the beginning of July. So I was like, yeah, I could totally do that. She's like, you can only miss 2 days of classes and still be able to graduate. What she didn't know, and what the person who wrote that on the stall door probably didn't know, was that I wouldn't actually have the baby, that I wouldn't be taking care of the baby because I had chosen to give him up for adoption. So I signed up for the summer school classes, and I was taking them, and I'm just chugging along, baking this baby, and, you know, ready, like Juno, just baking him a little longer and getting him to his parents. And I went into a labor. I call my mom because she worked nights, and I'm like, I think I'm in labor. And she's like, well, how far apart? And I'm like, it's like every 5 minutes. Like, it's pretty close. And she had to get off of her shift and get to the house and come get me. The adoptive couple was already there. I had picked this couple myself, like they were my people. So they were at the hospital before I even got there. So we get there. I have this baby. It's Thursday. I have him, hand him off to his lovely parents. The next day, the lawyers came. And while I was holding this beautiful baby boy, I signed away my rights to him. And then I went home with my mom, and I went back to school on Monday morning. And that's how I graduated high school. But for a long, long time, most of my life, over 2 decades, I held this story very close to my heart, very internally, because it was a shameful thing. And what do we do with those dark, ugly, shameful parts of ourselves? We hide them away. So that's what I had been doing he'll be 25 this year. And one day I had this kind of big idea that I had internalized this idea of being a knocked up hoe, of being a bad person who had made a bad mistake and done this horrible thing. And I was like, so wait a second, like, I'm a birth mother. At 17 years old, made this really mature, hard, selfless decision. And why was I holding on to that? And I didn't tell people, right? Like, because I was ashamed. And finally I was like, I've had enough. Like, I'm done hiding it. So in one of my first speaking presentations, I shared this story. And it, ironically, is the story that started getting me invited to speak at other places. I would not have shared that for over 20 years. I didn't share it. And now it's become one of the things that has made me stronger in my business and my personal, and it actually did help professionally, ironically, because I had people that came up that day and thanked me for being a birth mother, because one woman had adopted 2 children. One couple told me, we got pregnant when we were 15 and we just celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary. So it was like these cool stories of other people that they're like, now like they have permission to share their own stories that they wouldn't share. One of the other things that I talk about in living courageously and bravely and owning our stories is childhood trauma, and specifically childhood sexual abuse. So I know that in the past couple of years, there's been like the wave, there's been like the Me Too. And that I think that's been helpful in my journey because it's opening up conversations. But it is something that I speak to a lot of women's groups. As soon as you start that conversation, like there are a percentage of people, even right now, I'm sure that they shut off. People are like, we don't want to talk about it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to know about it. And I don't know the statistic for Texas, but I know that in Utah, it's 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys who are sexually abused before their 18th birthday. And I think, why is that? Are we not having the conversations that we need to have? And that's part of the journey, and that's part of See Stacy Speak and why I speak. Giving you the permission, because some of you have the same story. And I know that from all my previous engagements too, because every single time someone has reached out to me and said, me too. My overall message is that you know that you have the capacity to do anything that it is that you decide to do. So to be here today and to be a part of Dina's dream and realization, it's so beautiful, and I'm so glad to be a part of this journey with you. So thank you, and just remember that this is going to be your best year yet. And whatever the hard times are, whatever you come up against, you're going to rise above. And I believe that. Thank you, ladies.